Welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote comes from someone who is about as far from our usual roster of philosophers, military leaders, and 19th century novelists as you can get, and I think that's exactly why it belongs here. You're crazy until you're successful, then you are a genius. That's attributed to Jimmy Donaldson, better known as MrBeast, the most subscribed individual creator in the history of YouTube, with over 400 million subscribers, a philanthropic operation that has planted 20 million trees, built wells in Africa, and raised tens of millions for charity, and a content empire he built starting from his bedroom in Greenville, North Carolina, as a teenager, with almost no views. The quote circulates widely under his name and is completely consistent with everything he has said and demonstrated publicly. I couldn't pin it to a specific verified interview or timestamp, but given that his entire life is the quote's best proof, we'll engage with it as his and move straight into the idea, which is the point anyway. Now, the observation. It's blunt, it's a little wry, and it describes something that most people who have ever tried to do something unconventional have experienced firsthand. There is a specific kind of social judgment that attaches to ambitious, unusual, or unconventional ideas before they have been proven, and a completely different kind of social judgment that attaches to the same ideas after they have. The idea doesn't change. The person doesn't change. The work doesn't change. What changes is the outcome, and the outcome, in most people's minds, retroactively reframes everything that preceded it. Before the outcome, the person pursuing something improbable is crazy, not necessarily in a clinical sense, in a social sense. They're doing something that doesn't fit the recognizable template of what reasonable people do. They're spending time, energy, and often money on something that hasn't proven itself yet and might never do so. They're operating on a conviction about something that other people can't yet see. And in the absence of visible results, the most available explanation is that they simply lack good judgment. MrBeast's own story is the cleanest possible illustration of this. He started his YouTube channel at 13. He spent years, producing videos that got almost no views, studying the platform obsessively, reinvesting every dollar he made into the next video, and declining the kind of normal teenage social life that his peers were living. The idea that this was a reasonable use of his time and energy was not obvious. Spending 40 hours filming yourself, count to 100,000, and then condensing it into a video is not what a guidance counselor would recommend. It looked, from the outside, like an eccentric kid with a strange obsession and questionable priorities. And then it worked, and then it kept working, and then it worked at a scale nobody had seen before, and now the same behaviors, the same obsessiveness, the same willingness to do things that seemed absurd, the same everything, gets described as visionary, as genius, as the hallmarks of an exceptional mind that saw something others didn't. The genius was always there. The success just made it visible. This dynamic is not unique to YouTube. It runs through virtually every story of unconventional achievement across every field. The entrepreneur who remortgaged their house to fund a company everyone thought would fail and succeeded gets called a visionary. The one who did the same thing and failed gets called reckless. The artist who spent a decade making work nobody bought before breaking through is retrospectively described as someone who always had extraordinary vision. The one who spent a decade making work nobody bought and then stopped is just someone who tried and couldn't make it work. The behaviors were identical. The outcomes were different, and the outcomes determined, almost entirely, how the same behaviors got interpreted. In a prior episode, I discussed Bertrand Russell, who told us not to fear being eccentric in opinion, because every opinion now accepted was once considered eccentric. MrBeast is making the behavioral equivalent of that argument. Don't fear doing the thing that looks crazy, because the thing that looks crazy and succeeds gets renamed genius retroactively. The label was never really about the behavior. It was always about the result. What makes this genuinely uncomfortable and genuinely important is the implication it carries for how we evaluate people in real time. If the same behavior gets labeled crazy before success and genius after it, then the label itself contains almost no information about the actual quality of what's being done. It's a reflection of outcomes we can't yet see. which means the social pressure to conform, to not look crazy, to not do the thing that invites raised eyebrows, is pressure based on a judgment that will almost certainly be revised the moment the results come in. That doesn't make every unconventional idea brilliant. Most things that look crazy are just crazy. The vast majority of people who bet everything on an improbable outcome lose. That's the honest counterpoint, and it deserves real weight. The survivorship bias in stories like MrBeast's is significant. We hear about the people who were called crazy and then became geniuses precisely because they succeeded. We don't hear, with anything like the same frequency, about the equally committed, equally obsessive people who did everything right by their own lights and still didn't break through. They're not on the cover of anything. So the quote isn't a permission slip for recklessness or an argument that all unconventional bets eventually pay off. What it is, more precisely, is a warning against using social judgment as a reliable signal of whether something is worth pursuing. The crowd's opinion of your idea, before results exist, tells you almost nothing about the quality of the idea. It tells you a great deal about the crowd's comfort with uncertainty and deviation from the norm. Those are different things. And here's what I find most personally applicable about this observation, beyond the entrepreneurial context. Most of the most meaningful choices a person makes, about their relationships, their career, their values, how they want to spend the finite time they have, are choices that look, to some audience somewhere, a little crazy. Not necessarily as dramatic as betting your teenage years on YouTube, but they involve deviation from a template someone else would prefer you to follow. They involve conviction about something before the results are in. They involve tolerating the raised eyebrow. The people who let the raised eyebrow decide for them spend their lives inside other people's definitions of reasonable. The people who don't, who pursue the thing clearly and seriously, regardless of how it reads from the outside, are the ones who occasionally wind up getting called geniuses, and, more commonly, the ones who at least wind up living lives that were genuinely theirs. That's probably worth more than the label anyway. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one made you think of something you've been holding back because of how it might look, then it's worth a moment of honest consideration. As always, wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I'll see you in the next one.